The cold had a strange way of making silence louder. Snow fell softly over the empty streets, blanketing everything in white. Street lights glowed like lonely stars, and each passing car sent a ghostly shimmer across the wet asphalt. Daniel stood by the lamppost, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. He checked his watch for the 15th time. 9:47 p.m. His blind date was supposed to arrive at 7. He almost laughed at himself, the kind of hollow laugh that hides disappointment. Maybe this was life's way of reminding him that hope was for the foolish. He had promised himself not to try again after his last heartbreak, but his best friend insisted, saying, "Come on, man, one dinner won't kill you." Yet here he was, standing in the bitter cold, while the empty seat at the cafe window behind him mocked his faith in love. But something made him stay. Maybe it was the quiet snowfall. Maybe it was the part of him that still believed that somewhere, somehow, good things find their way back. Before we go deeper into Daniel's story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and that every soul deserves warmth on a cold night, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us spread more stories that touch hearts. The city clock struck 10. Daniel sighed, his feet numb from standing too long. He decided to give it 10 more minutes before leaving. As he turned to head toward the cafe door, something in the corner of his eye caught his attention. A faint movement near the bus stop across the street. A woman, wrapped in a worn grey coat, stood holding a small child. The boy's beanie was pulled down over his ears, and his little face peeked out, pink from the cold. The mother's shoulders trembled as she tried to keep the child warm, but her own hands were bare, red, and shaking. Daniel hesitated. It wasn't any of his business yet. Something about the scene tugged at his heart. He crossed the street slowly, snow crunching beneath his shoes. When he reached the bus stop, the woman looked up, startled, her eyes wary. He spoke gently, asking if she was okay. She nodded quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. Her lips were pale, her breath short. The little boy clung to her, his head resting against her shoulder. Daniel glanced at the empty street. No bus in sight, just miles of quiet road swallowed by the night. He asked again softly if she needed help. This time, her voice broke. She said she was fine, just waiting for a bus that hadn't come for over an hour. Her words trembled in the cold. Daniel could hear the exhaustion behind them, not just from the night, but from something deeper. He offered to wait with her, insisting that it was too cold for the boy to be outside. After a pause, she nodded reluctantly. Minutes turned into silence. Snowflakes landed on the boy's hat as he stared at Daniel curiously. The woman eventually whispered that her name was Emily, and her son's name was Owen. She had just finished her late shift at a small diner and was trying to get home, but the buses were running late because of the storm, and she didn't have enough money for a taxi. Daniel noticed the weariness in her eyes, the kind that comes from fighting too many quiet battles alone. He offered to buy them something warm from the cafe nearby. Emily refused at first, embarrassed, but when Owen started shivering, she finally agreed. Inside the cafe, the warmth wrapped around them like a blessing. Daniel ordered hot chocolate for the boy and coffee for Emily. They sat by the window, watching the snow fall harder outside. Owen smiled for the first time that night, his small hands wrapped around the cup. Emily's eyes softened when she saw her son smile. Daniel studied her quietly, the faint lines of tiredness near her eyes, the way she held her son close, the quiet strength that radiated from her. She was beautiful, not in the polished way that people often notice, but in the raw, human way that life shapes through endurance and love. When she finally looked up, she caught him staring and gave a small, shy smile. "You must think we're a mess," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "I think you're stronger than you realize." Something in her eyes flickered, a mix of surprise and gratitude. She asked why he was out so late, and he hesitated before admitting he had been waiting for someone who never showed up. Her expression softened with empathy. As they talked, time seemed to slow. Emily shared bits of her story. How she had moved to the city after leaving an unhealthy relationship, how she worked double shifts to make ends meet, how Owen was her reason to keep going. She spoke with quiet pride, but also with an ache that words couldn't hide. Daniel listened, not out of pity, but because something about her story made him feel awake again. For years he had moved through life like a man half asleep, dulled by disappointments. But hearing her speak, seeing how fiercely she loved despite everything, it reminded him what it meant to care, to try, to believe again. When the clock struck midnight, the snow outside had thickened into a soft white curtain. The last bus had already stopped running. Emily looked anxious, realizing she had no way home. Daniel immediately offered to drive them, but she hesitated, not wanting to impose. He insisted gently, and she finally agreed after seeing Owen's sleepy eyes. The drive was quiet, filled with the rhythmic hum of the heater and the soft sound of Owen's breathing. Emily gave directions to a small apartment building on the edge of town. When they arrived, she turned to thank him, her voice trembling with sincerity. But before she could open the door, Owen stirred and mumbled, "Mommy, the nice man helped us." It was a simple sentence, but it hit Daniel like a wave. Emily smiled sadly and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Daniel nodded, though words felt too small. As she carried Owen up the icy steps, Daniel watched her disappear into the dimly lit hallway. Then he sat there for a moment, staring at the snow, wondering why his heart felt heavier and warmer than it had in years. The next morning he found himself thinking about her. He didn't know why, but something inside urged him to check if she was okay. He drove back to the diner where she worked, hoping to see her. When he walked in, Emily was there, wiping down tables with tired but steady hands. When she saw him, her eyes widened in surprise. She smiled, a real smile this time, and asked if he was there for breakfast or to check on her. He laughed softly and said, "Maybe both." From that day, Daniel began stopping by the diner often. Sometimes he'd bring flowers, sometimes just conversation. Emily was cautious at first, afraid of hoping for too much, but slowly she began to trust his presence, the kind of quiet consistency she hadn't known in years. Owen grew fond of Daniel too. He'd wave from behind the counter, proudly showing the pictures he drew at preschool. Daniel would always stop to listen, always smile as if those drawings were masterpieces. Weeks turned into months. The winter melted into spring, and with it, the chill that once separated them began to thaw. Daniel realized that what he had been waiting for that night wasn't just a blind date. It was a turning point, a moment where fate led him to someone who didn't need rescuing, but simply needed someone to stand beside her. Emily learned to laugh again. Daniel learned to believe again. And Owen, well, he found in Daniel the warmth of something he hadn't known he was missing, the presence of someone who stayed. One rainy afternoon, Daniel stopped by the diner as usual. Emily handed him a cup of coffee and smiled. "You know," she said softly, "I never told you this, but that night, I almost didn't go to the bus stop. I was going to walk home, even though it was miles away. But something told me to wait." Daniel looked at her, his heart swelling with quiet gratitude. "Maybe," he said, "we were both meant to wait." The world outside continued to move fast and loud, but inside that little diner, time seemed to stand still. Two souls who'd been lost in different ways finally finding their way home. Months later, on a snowy evening that looked almost like the night they met, Daniel walked Emily and Owen to the same cafe. He smiled at her and said, "Do you remember this place?" She laughed, nodding. "How could I forget?" He reached into his coat pocket, took a deep breath, and knelt in the snow. Emily's eyes widened, tears immediately filling them. "Emily," he said softly, "that night I thought I was waiting for a date, but now I know I was waiting for you, for this family, for this chance. I don't want another winter to go by without you by my side." Her hands covered her mouth as she nodded through tears, whispering yes before he could even finish. Owen clapped his little hands, snowflakes falling all around them like blessings. That night, as they walked home together, No longer strangers, no longer broken, Daniel looked up at the same streetlight where he had once stood alone. Only this time, he smiled, knowing that sometimes love doesn't arrive when you plan it. It finds you when your heart is brave enough to wait. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in love's quiet miracles, and subscribe for more emotional, real-life stories that remind us that kindness and hope can change everything. Before you go, comment below, "I believe love finds us when we least expect it," because sometimes it really does.